yeah, I decided to teach myself the most niche craft of the 21st century for simply no reason other than I wanted to. Okay, so basically when I started, I originally didn't want to look anything up about bookbinding stitches and stuff for some reason. I enjoyed the thought that each artisan in ancient, times throughout the world would have their own kind of like stamp or method for doing things. So I wanted to kind of experiment before I looked stuff up. I mean, this is just a simple, some people call it like a pamphlet stitch or a kettle stitch. And normally it's easier to do it all with one singular piece of thread, but this is slightly thicker paper, and so it's a bit more difficult to work with the needle and everything. As you can see, I'm using sometimes when I stab my fingers, I start using a pair of pliers to get the needle through, because it is actually quite thick paper, because I want this to be more of like a sketchbook, I suppose. And it does, in case you're wondering, it does include many stab wounds in my hands. Randomly, one time I was watching a documentary with her in it, Ruth Goodman. This is her book. So randomly I was just watching this documentary about Tudor era and Tudor monastery farms, and they genuinely had 1 minute scene, and it was a documentary with her, and I think it's someone related to her actually who did the bookbinding, but they didn't even show very much. It was filmed on a potato in like 2002. And so I decided that I was just gonna try without any instructions, without looking up anything. It wasn't good. I do have it still, but it's positively painful and kind of looks like Shrek pulled it out of his ear. It's horrid. You can technically do this with any sort of paper, but I don't really have a choice in what paper I find. I try to get paper sustainably and not just like buy it off the shelves. So I go to, thrift stores. There are art salvage stores, which I really enjoy. They're like thrift stores, but just for craft stuff, and so I'll get, hundreds and hundreds of paper for a lot cheaper than you would anywhere else, and it's just, been sitting in someone's house somewhere. Someone's grandma was like, oh, I have this collection of papers, might as well give it away. But that's why each book really is different. If you look at my website online, I do have an Etsy, so if you wanna look at it, just if you wanna, not big. Anyways. And slowly as I started working, I began just looking at old books and like what they look like inside of them. So for an example, I have The Fire of Girdleston by Arthur Conan Doyle. And then I would just genuinely just stare at the books, and just, you can kind of see, because also they're quite old, so they kind of do show what's happening on the inside a bit, but it's from like the early 1900s. Oh yeah, it has a writing from 1902. I love old books. I just think it's so cool, like how many different people read this and how many different people, like hands have been on this, and how many people had this in their bag and where has it been. Like it was just in my niche random like secondhand bookstore, but from 1902. It could have been from anywhere. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting it in a makeshift bookbinding press. This isn't my official one, this is like a mini one. I put all the signatures, or which is just a stack of papers, together, and then I basically thread my needle crisscross through each of the single stitch that I had done in each one, down every single stitch in kind of like a X pattern. Unfortunately, because my camera, it's my fault, the framing. I like my books to be protected and as solid as possible, so I will do a light glue layer followed by a bit of either linen, or if I have any like binding tape or linen tape, I'll use that. So it gives it a sturdy backing. Some people do more layers than that, and headbands, etc., but I do not have all the proper materials. Same with a plow. I'd love to have a plow. However, those are expensive and I cannot afford. In this economy, no. I will have it set and dry for at least 24 hours normally, which isn't fully dry. It's just enough to work with without anything dislodging. But if I didn't have all the drying times, it would probably only take me like 4 to 6 hours per book, depending on the complicatedness of it, obviously. Or another example is this one, which is a Jane Eyre copy by Charlotte Bronte. This one is falling apart entirely. I found it in a secondhand bookstore in England for like £5. It was an entire bookstore, just like absolutely, just think of the most like fairy tale bookstore you can think of, just absolutely stacked with books everywhere to the ceilings, like first edition Jane Austens and crazy, just old, like from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s books. I am planning on fixing these, but it's a little bit more difficult than when working with like regular brand new paper. The paper and the glue and everything is very, very brittle. So then once it's dried and I trim off any excess linen or tape, then I'll just trace the book itself. And then I do have I don't know what you call it, not like a rotary cutter, but the giant machete thing connected to a piece of plastic that it works sometimes. If you haven't already spotted the mozzarella cheese stick cardboard, I receive cardboard from so many people. My bedroom has so much cardboard in it. I mean, it's very handy. You just have to make sure that it's not the like trifold kind of cardboard. And I prefer the thicker stuff, but I like to not have to go out and buy anything, and I don't know. I don't want to use factory made new stuff when there's plenty of stuff people are throwing away all over. Same with all the covers, which you can see me now getting ready to put it on. That cover is actually from my own grandmother, though I do have many other grandmothers' vintage fabrics and tablecloths that I've cut up and all the sorts. I try my best to, find stuff that's recycled or upcycled or sustainable, I don't know, however, without greenwashing. Now you see here I've glued the cardboard on with leaving room for the spine, which you can, depending on what you're making, put cardboard in the middle, but for this I didn't want to do that. I cut along the corners so that we can make a nice little box, like almost as if you were creating a paper box where you cut the sides, but instead you're cutting a triangle. I don't know if that makes any sense, but and then just use a thin layer of glue, and then you can see that I'm kind of using the glue brush to just push down on the other side, just because it makes a harder edge. And also, I am always terrified of something coming loose. Even though this glue is terrific, I have ruined so many pieces of clothing. It sticks to everything. So, I mean, I think it works. Okay, so this is what we call my stupid camera not actually recording for longer than 20 minutes. I don't know why. It's a Sony A2-7 or something. Someone please help me. There's nothing in the settings, and I've had this camera for years and it has never gone past 20 minutes. Anyways, I instead have this recreation of the next step using a different book. This is a black paper sketchbook, hence why the glue shows up a lot more on there, but I promise it is a thin layer, okay? It just shows up a lot more on the black paper. But I have a black paper sketchbook, and I found this paper and thought it would be really cool to make more. I do want to keep it, but I am not going to, because I have so many books in my house, so many journals and sketchbooks, it's ridiculous. So this is probably going to go on my Etsy as well, just because I don't know what else I would do with it. Quite finished my other black sketchbook again, so I figure I can make another one. And then I tried to see if it would fit in my mini one, and then it did not, so I put my jewelry box on top. But you know, it works. Oh, and always label your pages, what's front and back. Once we have labeled everything and it's dried for at least 24 hours, in my opinion, I have a lot of different end paper options, and you can put this on before connecting it to the cover. However, these papers are of different weights, and that can cause troubles just when you're drying and moving things around, so I like to do it separately so that I can control what goes where, and so that there's no like wrinkles or rips or anything. And again, just a thin layer of glue, and this is like a nice little aged speckled paper found at a thrift store, I believe, and was gifted to me, so that's kind of fun. Bookbinding as a craft was very based upon binder to binder, and throughout the entirety of the medieval era, the only people who had access and money to the products to be able to make books, because, you know, before the printing press, and especially before craft paper was invented in the 1800s, which is like, you know, where wood is like turned into pulp, but before that, they had to make it using parchment, which is basically leather that's been like treated and stretched a bunch. And, you know, having the ability to write was not very common. Having the ability to do all the ornate scripting and all the embossing and all the detail that were put into this. So mostly it was, you know, churches, monasteries, and they were paying people specifically as scribes and bookmakers. But it wasn't something that the average person could do, and definitely not like a hobby. This would be your job if you were working in the church, essentially, until later. And then here are some different end papers. I just was giving a few examples of what I'm looking for. I have so many random little bits of paper that I found all over the place, and I try to sort through and just kind of pick a color scheme and go from there. I don't really have a method of choosing. I just look at things and go, ooh, that'll be cute. So I have these little flowers that I've cut up, again, from old like calendars and stuff, reused. One of those earlier end papers was actually a vintage calendar from the 40s of some lithographic prints. That's my own little book though, because I have to keep one every once in a while. As if I already don't have enough books. But I found this cute little kind of, I don't know, Art Nouveau-y kind of looking stuff with a few bit of modern pieces. I try, once I find a historical looking thing, I try to stick to that era. However, you know, I only have what I have to work with. This is probably one of my favorite parts. However, it is the most time consuming, I would say, just considering that I spend way too much time fiddling through and changing my mind. As you can see, I go through that box like 3 times. And once I have all the papers in place that I think can go there and fit, at least in the corners, then I add my little bookend corner pieces, which aren't necessary, but I really like them. I think they pull it together and give it that sort of added aged look, as these aren't exactly common use anymore. So I think it's just a fun little thing to add. Then you can use little pliers, but these ones are fairly malleable metal, so I just glue them on there and then squish it down with a range of items normally, as I don't actually have that many huge giant books. However, I would like to bind some giant books. But if you have anything that you want to see in particular about bookbinding or tools, or if you want to learn yourself, I don't know, you can let me know in the comments. But yeah, this is my finished book that I made for this one. I quite like it. It's with this like vintage Italian fabric that's quite soft. It's technically a curtain sample from my family, because they're, I don't know, in Italy they have like a carpentry thing. I don't know exactly. But I'm quite proud of it. I think it looks cute enough. I don't know. I'd use it.
Ooh, wow. Look at all that. Look at all those journal pictures. Wow, look at that. Wow, look. Ooh, Endpapers, fancy. Our new dough, strawberries.
And if you got this far, thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe and like, because I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do more videos because I really enjoy this, and also other design stuff because I'm a nerd and I watch too many video essays online. So. These are not all of them, but here's a few ones that I've made that I just have sitting in here. These are not all of them. I've sold a lot. I've given away many, especially my first ones, my first batches. And I also have a bunch more in the living room.